Hi guys, it's me ChazzaHD and welcome to the first race review on this channel. And of course today we are going to be reviewing yesterday's 2019 Australian Grand Prix. The race feels like it happened so long ago, but it was only about, I think, 17 or 18 hours ago. It was a pretty good race, and I think it's a good starting point for 2019 with the new regulations, of course. And in today's video, we are going to review everything that happened, go through all the teams, look at some quotes, analyse some incidents, look at the championship tables, all of that stuff will be done in this race review. Hopefully you guys, wherever you're watching from in the world, hopefully you're doing very well. At currently in the UK, 6 PM UK time, no matter where it is, where you are, hopefully you are doing well. And yeah, let's get into this race review. Now, if somehow you did miss the 2019 Australian Grand Prix yesterday, let me now take you through the results of the race down under. So winning the race in an amazing fashion was Valtteri Bottas from Lewis Hamilton in second. That's a Mercedes 1-2, the first 1-2 for that team at Albert Park since 2016. And then Max Verstappen finishes third, Vettel is fourth, Leclerc is fifth. A poor day for Ferrari. A very good one for Haas, Magnussen is sixth, Hülkenberg is P7, Raikkonen P8, Stroll P9, and Danny Kvyat finishes in P10. Then the bottom 10 is Gasly, who just missed out on a point. Then Norris, Perez, Albon, Giovinazzi, Russell, and Kubica. And then your retirements are Romain Grosjean, Daniel Ricciardo, and Carlos Sainz. So those are the results of what happened in Melbourne. But now let's thoroughly review each team and how they did in the Australian Grand Prix. So, of course, we are going to start with the world champions and at the very top with Mercedes, who all weekend had the best car. From the moment it came out of the pit lane in practice one, their car just looked nailed to this track. It does suit the Mercedes car a lot. We've seen that in the past, and once again, it does suit that car very, very well. But Valtteri Bottas was so impressive this weekend. Not only in the Grand Prix, but if you look at the weekend, he was impressive because in qualifying, for example, he put in a stunning first attempt in Q3 and was half a second clear of Lewis Hamilton. Then, of course, Hamilton did what he did, and Bottas ended, a 10th off of pole position, so he was still very competitive. And then, at the start of the Grand Prix, Valtteri Bottas got past Lewis Hamilton. He was past Hamilton basically as soon as the lights went out. That's how good Valtteri's start was. And then, from then on, he just relentlessly pulled away and dominated the Grand Prix. There was no one out there that was going to beat him on race day. He was unstoppable in that car, but also with his driving, he was quite frankly unstoppable and was thoroughly deserving of winning the Grand Prix. And this is what Valtteri Bottas had to say after his first win in quite a while. He said, "This feels so good. I don't think I've ever had a race like this. We could not have asked for a better start to the season." Exactly. Getting maximum points for the team is a perfect result and we couldn't be happier. Remember also Bottas had the fastest lap points, so Mercedes picked up the most amount of points available at this Grand Prix. He also says, it's also an important result for me personally. I'm really pleased with how the race went, and it is an important race for him because at the back end of 2018, people were really critical of Valtteri. I was at times because he wasn't performing well enough, but this performance has really shut a lot of people up, and I like to see that because this guy is a lot better than people think. A lot better than people think. When he is performing, he is deserving of being in a top car, but you just don't get that enough sometimes, and hopefully he does keep up this level of performance. And these are the key stats coming away for Valtteri Bottas from this Grand Prix. So it's his first win since the 2017 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. That's quite a long time ago. It's also his fourth win in Formula One. And as I said a minute ago, it's Mercedes' first also win, not only 1-2, in Melbourne since 2016. Well done to Valtteri Bottas. He was clearly the driver of the day. No one could match him. And yeah, a very, very well done to him. But now let's go on to Lewis Hamilton, who... he didn't have a bad Grand Prix, but it wasn't anything that you're going to remember from him, when he retires soon enough. It wasn't pace-wise that great, but it has come out that Lewis Hamilton had damage to his floor. Now, I have seen plenty of people saying, "Oh, that's why Lewis Hamilton, lost to Bottas." I'm going to say this now. You may not like it, but Lewis Hamilton would have finished second even with a completely undamaged and 100% working floor. Valtteri Bottas would have beat Hamilton anyway. It wouldn't have actually changed the result at all. Hamilton still would have finished in P2. Valtteri Bottas still would have finished in P1. Bottas was just too good. So, for me, it does matter because he could have lost position to Max Verstappen at the end, but in terms of the end result, it doesn't really make a difference because I don't think he would have beat Bottas anyway. So even though it has come out and there are photographs that do prove that he did have damage to his floor, it doesn't really make a difference for me to the end result. But going forward for Lewis Hamilton, he won't be super happy that he has finished in P2, but I think he'll be moderately happy considering that it was his teammate that won and not, Sebastian Vettel or Max Verstappen, because if it had been one of those two, he would not have been happy. But because it was Bottas, at least Lewis knows that that car that he's driving is performing very well, and also he is going to beat Valtteri Bottas in 2019. So, he will be moderately happy considering the result that did happen. But this is what Lewis had to say at the end of the Grand Prix. He says, "It was an incredible weekend for the team. We're leaving Melbourne with maximum points. Valtteri did an exceptional job today. Congratulations to him. I had a pretty straightforward race today. I lost position at the start and my race was pretty much done and dusted after the first corner." Exactly. And I think he knew that he had damage to his floor. And I think he also knows as well that even if he had a healthy car, he was not going to beat his teammate. His teammate was just too good. So for me, Hamilton, yeah, second place. It's not the end of the world. I mean, of course, it's another Australian Grand Prix where he's been on pole and failed to win. He's only won the Australian Grand Prix twice and he's been on pole 8 times. So he is really making a habit of not converting pole positions at this track. But again, at least it's not Vettel or Verstappen winning. At least it's his teammate Valtteri Bottas. But for Mercedes, a very good weekend. They had the best car, and we'll be hoping to continue that into Bahrain, even though I don't think they will be anywhere near as quick. We'll get onto that later on, maybe this week on the channel, or maybe in the early part of next week, but I don't think Mercedes are going to be anywhere near as strong in Bahrain. That's not to say they won't win. I think they have a very, very good chance of winning the Bahrain Grand Prix. But they're not going to be as strong as they were in Melbourne at that track, because Bahrain requires a lot different things from the cars than Albert Park does. But a very good weekend for Mercedes, and they'll be hoping to continue that into the desert in Bahrain. But now let's move on to a team that had an absolute shocker, as the title says, Ferrari. Their weekend from start to finish was just not good enough. If we talk about the race first, the whole team, the drivers, no one from Ferrari can come away saying they did well. The whole team, the drivers, were poor. Charles Leclerc, up until his first pit stop, was poor. He was losing a second a lap to Valtteri Bottas. Now, I know Bottas was quick, the Mercedes car was faster, but even Vettel in the first stint of the Grand Prix was not losing a second a lap to Bottas, and Leclerc should have been a lot better. And of course, Charles went off during his first stint at turn 1. But then in the second stint, Sebastian Vettel was terrible. And then, of course, you had the whole team orders thing, which, by the way, we will get onto later. I am going to analyse later on in this stream deeper the issues that Ferrari had, and there were plenty of them. But yeah, the drivers were not good enough in the Grand Prix for me. The team was not good enough. The pace of the car was nowhere near good enough. The pace of the car, I will say this, the pace of the car in qualifying wasn't necessarily that worrying to me, because if you look at 2018 at the same track, the gap was, in terms of the fastest Ferrari to pole position, it was about the same. And then, of course, at the next two races, Bahrain and China, Ferrari locked out the front row and won in Bahrain. So the pace of the Ferrari in qualifying didn't necessarily worry me that much. But the pace of the car in the race really did, because if you go back and look at the 2018 Australian Grand Prix, Ferrari were losing, I think, a quarter of a second a lap in the 2018 race before the virtual safety car and all of that madness when Vettel jumped Lewis Hamilton. In this Grand Prix, compared to Bottas, the Ferraris were losing about a second a lap over most of the Grand Prix. And then to Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen in that battle, they were losing half a second a lap. That is what really concerns me with Ferrari coming away from this Grand Prix, was the such dramatic drop-off in pace on race day. I thought they would be closer on race day in terms of pace. I thought they would be probably, I don't know, 0.3 closer, but they seem to be further away on race day compared to where they were in qualifying with Vettel and Charles Leclerc. So very, very disappointing for Ferrari, and as I will get onto later, this team has a lot of work to do, because there are issues with this car and other areas that will not be fixed overnight, and I'll get onto that later on. And also I will analyse the team orders thing later on and give my final verdict on that. But yeah, for Ferrari, terrible, absolutely terrible. And they've got to improve for the next race in Bahrain. I think Ferrari in Bahrain, I think in qualifying Ferrari will be very, very good, but in the race, after what they did in the race in Melbourne, I'm not sure they can win. We'll have to see once we get to the practice sessions in Bahrain. But I think in qualifying they'll be good. But in the race, after what they showed at the Australian Grand Prix, I'm really not sure they're going to win that Grand Prix, even if they start on pole. So we will see once we get to Bahrain. Next up, though, is Red Bull, who had a good day with Honda. Honda got their first podium since the 2008 British Grand Prix. That is 11 years, and that's fantastic to see Honda back on a Formula 1 podium. But for Red Bull, I think a good race with Max Verstappen at least. We'll get on to Pierre Gasly in a moment, but with Max Verstappen, a good Grand Prix. He got away well. He could have passed Vettel at turn 1, but couldn't quite do it. And then sticked behind Vettel for the opening stint. And then once Vettel pitted early on for the medium tyres, Verstappen stayed out, I think it was about 10 laps or near 10 laps longer. Then came out not that far behind Sebastian Vettel, and then of course passed him. By the way, we will analyse that overtake by Verstappen later on in the stream. But yeah, Max, great overtake. Then he closed up to Lewis Hamilton and was right on his tail until the end of the Grand Prix. But I think the Mercedes car was just too good that he could not go for a move. He tried his hardest. He did make a mistake at turn 1, so maybe he was trying too hard, but at least he did try to get into P2. And I think for Max, a very, very good first race. And by the way, this is Red Bull's first podium at this track since 2013. And of course, that season, they won the Drivers' World Championship and also the Constructors. I'm not saying they're going to do that this year, but it does show you maybe how much progress this team has already made with Honda. So we'll see what they can do in Bahrain. But this is what Max Verstappen had to say after the Grand Prix. I'm very happy for the team and also for Honda to finish on the podium today. Since we started working together, it has been amazing and I am really enjoying the partnership. So this is a well-deserved third place for all of us. To be able to challenge Lewis at the end of the race and overtake Seb on track is very positive. And it is, because if you look at last year's Australian Grand Prix, Red Bull were not as competitive as they were this weekend. It wasn't a massive gap. Red Bull were probably, quarter of a second at most faster with Honda this year than they were with Renault last year in terms of the gap compared to other teams like Ferrari and Mercedes. But it was better for Red Bull with Honda this Grand Prix than it was Red Bull with Renault last year in 2018. So looking good for this team. But for Pierre Gasly, it was not a good Grand Prix. And I think this picture pretty much sums up his Grand Prix. It's being stuck behind plenty of cars. That's pretty much what his race was. He did have clean air for a bit. I think it was 6 or 7 laps when he was running in P6. So he did have some clean air. But then once he came in and put on the soft compound tyre, he couldn't go anywhere with it because Danny Kvyat ahead in P10 was very, very good at defending his position. Now, I have seen people criticising Gasly, and I do personally think he could have done better in a couple of occasions to get past, say, Danny Kvyat. But you have to remember, the team really put him in that situation with that terrible strategy mistake in qualifying. So if he qualified where he should have, which would have been P6 most likely, he would have ended up maybe ahead of the 2 Ferraris at the end of the Australian Grand Prix, finishing in P4. So I understand why people want to criticise him, but you have to remember that he was put in that position because of the team, not himself, and he had his work cut out. So don't, go deep on the guy. Don't go absolutely in on him. The team put him in that area of the grid. And for Bahrain, let's see what he can do. Of course, last year in Bahrain, he had his best result in the history of his F1 career, P4. So if he can do something similar, then it'd be a good weekend for him in Bahrain. But yeah, let's wait and see how he does in Bahrain before we jump the gun and say, is he good enough or anything like that? Because he was never going to finish P6 or P7. He was never going to do that because the drivers he had to pass were very tough to overtake. And Albert Park is not easy to overtake at. So there you go. But before I go on to the midfield, guys, let me know right now in the comments and in the live chat, let me know what you thought of the performances of the top 3 teams. And I'll try to read out as many comments as I can, and then we will go on to midfield. I'll read out some comments for, say, 5 minutes, and then we'll go on to the midfield. And also, guys, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, as the content that you have seen, if you have, over this weekend is basically the format for the race weekends on this channel. So don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there, or click on my channel name, go to my channel page and subscribe and hit the notifications bell. But let me see now what you guys have to say about what happened for the top teams in Australia. Daniel Crawford says Hamilton will win Bahrain. Ferrari looks slow. The F1 debate show, great to see him. By the way, if you have not checked out the podcast episode I did with him on his channel, make sure after this stream is finished to go to his channel and look at that video. I did it, what, a week and a half ago, I think it was. So yeah, don't forget to go and watch that. He says, disappointed with Ferrari, Red Bull have potential, and Mercedes are just Mercedes. Yep. I pretty much agree with you there. E7 suspect, Ferrari should be worried because I don't think they expected to be fighting Red Bull also. Plus, we know Red Bull is the best team for development. Yes, indeed. Red Bull do develop the best out of any team in Formula 1. And it is worrying the pace that the Ferrari had on race day. The pace in qualifying I don't think was that worrying, considering the gap between Ferrari and pole position at the 2018 race. But the pace on race day, I don't know what combination of things caused that, but they have to sort out their issues, because they are just, if they are struggling that much in the race in Bahrain, they will not win in Bahrain. They will not win in Bahrain. Irvin says Ferrari is not that far off. It's only the first race of the season. They have plenty of time to improve, and they will improve. Yeah, I think Ferrari, again, in Bahrain, Ferrari will be a lot closer than they were at this race. This race, historically for Ferrari, pace-wise, doesn't tend to be, doesn't tend to be the greatest Grand Prix. Bahrain tends to be a very good track for Ferrari. So, yeah, I think they'll be a lot closer in qualifying. I wouldn't be surprised if Vettel gets pole in Bahrain, but when it comes to the race, I can't say whether Ferrari are going to win, because their race pace was quite alarming, to be honest. Ivan Jones says, new regs are a good effective step forward, in my opinion, which enabled especially the midfield to be very close on track. For example, the last 5 laps at the end from Hulkenberg down to Gasly, about a 6-car train, very positive. The new regulations for me did work. It wasn't a great race, but it was a good one. We had battles on track. We had people being able to follow closer. And yeah, I thought it was a good Grand Prix. I also think the harder tyres, the tyres being harder this year, has also helped that. And if that becomes evident this season, then why not make them even harder for 2020? But yeah, the new regulations, the new front wings, for me, worked absolutely fine. They enabled drivers to follow a lot better. If you go back and watch the whole race, when they cut on board to Danny Kvyat behind Lance Stroll, watch how his car is following Stroll in the final corner, and then compare that to, say, 2018, and you will see a massive difference. The cars in 2019 are able to follow, and I think in Bahrain, guys, we are going to have a great race. We're going to have plenty of overtaking and plenty of wheel-to-wheel action, especially at the top. Right, I'll read out one more comment, and then I will go on to the midfield. And the final comment, is Eric Myers. Any news on the aero philosophies? Red Bull, apparently Red Bull, Mercedes have a different front wing from all the teams. Between the top teams, Ferrari is the outlier here. Yeah, Ferrari have a different concept to Mercedes and Red Bull. Ferrari's looks a lot more aggressive. The Red Bull one looks a bit more simple. The Mercedes one is kind of in between, but more so closer to the Red Bull one. So yeah, Ferrari have gone for a different concept. Maybe that's why they were struggling pace-wise. We will see in Bahrain, where you do need a good front end in Bahrain, and you desperately cannot afford to have understeer at that track, because you will struggle, especially in qualifying. But now, let's go on to the midfield, and then I'll come back to you guys in a moment, and then we'll go on to some talking points from the Grand Prix. So, starting off with Renault, Daniel Ricciardo, very disappointing home Grand Prix. His race was basically over after about 5 seconds, if that, after making contact with a gutter on the side of the track. By the way, I will analyse that incident later on, so I'm not going to go too deep into it right now. But yeah, very disappointing. And his race was, yeah, over there and then. But for Nico Hülkenberg, I think I did not give him enough credit in the race watch along yesterday. By the way, the race watch along, if you haven't checked it out, is in the description down below. Yeah, I didn't give him enough credit after the Grand Prix, because the Renault car was not quick enough to finish in P7, but he put it there because of a great start to the Grand Prix, and then nicely held on at the end and did not succumb to the pressure of Kimi Raikkonen, Lance Stroll, Danny Kvyat and Pierre Gasly. So a very good drive from Nico, finishing in the exact same position he did at last year's race in a Renault car that in the pecking order looks to be worse than it was last year. So very good from Hülkenberg. Hülkenberg also was basically ahead of Ricciardo the entire weekend. Hülkenberg looked to have the edge over Daniel Ricciardo. But one thing I will say, Renault have a lot of work to do, because yes, they finished in P7, but if you look at the Grand Prix, the only reason they finished in P7 was because Hülkenberg got a great start and got up to 8th, and then finished in 7th because Grosjean had that error at the pit stop and then retired with a left front wheel nut issue, and then had to hold on from 4 cars at the end of the race. So Renault have a lot of work to do, because pace wise they should not have been in that position. They should have been, they say, like, I don't know, P9, P10. They really should have been in that position. P7 was not a position that they really should have got from this weekend, because the car was not that quick, as was proven in qualifying, where they qualified P11 and P12 on the 6th row of the grid. So a lot of work to do for this team. They're not the fastest team in the midfield. After watching testing, I knew that they didn't have the fastest car in the midfield, and it was very close between them, Alfa and Haas. I can't believe some people were saying that Renault was so definite for best of the rest, because when I was at testing, they were not best of the rest at all. And I don't know what some of those people were watching, honestly, because I did not see that from the Renault, and you could clearly see that at Albert Park. And I don't think things, by the way, are going to get better at Bahrain, because Bahrain will not suit that Renault car as much, because Bahrain has a lot of straights where the Renault car is going to struggle. So don't expect that good of a performance from Renault in Bahrain. I'm honestly doubting whether they will finish in the points. That's honestly the lack of pace I think there is in that Renault compared to really where it should be. Moving on though to McLaren, who with Lando Norris had a good A good qualifying, of course, but the race, he did his best, but he couldn't get into the points because basically, guys, the McLaren is not quick enough. It's nowhere near quick enough to finish in the points yet. And that's why he was the driver of the day on Saturday in qualifying, because the McLaren car was not really that good enough to finish in that type of position, but he did put it in that position and was so good. But yeah, on race day, he did his best. He was in the points up until the first pit stop, but after that, and after getting held up by Antonio Giovinazzi, he was never really going to finish in the points, and that is a bit of a shame, but that's just the way it is. He could have got past him, could have got past Giovinazzi quicker, but to Antonio's credit, he defended very well, and Lando eventually did make a dive down the inside at turn 3. But yeah, after that, was struggling and barely beat Perez and Albon, who finished behind him in 13th and 14th. So even though it was not a bad weekend from McLaren, they have a lot to improve if they want to score points. And I think Bahrain is going to be a tough race for them. But for Carlos Sainz, very disappointing. He could have been in that fight with Stroll, Kvyat, Raikkonen, as he was, I think, ahead of Kvyat and Gasly before he retired from the Grand Prix because of an issue with the Renault power unit. So very disappointing there for Carlos Sainz, considering that he has, before this race anyway, scored points at every Australian Grand Prix that he has competed in. But of course, he did not yesterday. So yeah, disappointing there. But yeah, for McLaren, they need to improve. There's not enough pace in that car to finish in the points based on pure pace. The only way at the moment I see McLaren finishing in the points is luck, or, you know, retirements ahead. That's the only way I really see McLaren getting points. Hopefully, after Shanghai, maybe they can bring a small upgrade and improve. But definitely after the Spanish Grand Prix, this team does have to start moving up the grid. Not massively, but, you know, moving closer to finishing the points and then maybe finishing in the points. Yep, there you go. That is McLaren. Moving on now to Alfa Romeo. Kimi Raikkonen, I think, did well with what he had in the Australian Grand Prix weekend, but I still think Alfa could have done better. I think they could have beat Hülkenberg in the Renault. It's a bit of a shame that Kimi could not undercut past Hülkenberg at the only round of pit stops. That is a bit of a shame, but you know, it did not come off. He did close up at the end, but could not properly get a good run and utilize the DRS to his advantage. But yeah, for Alfa Romeo, I'm kind of disappointed. It is a good result still. Don't get me wrong, it is a good result. But for Alfa Romeo, I think they could have finished better than P8 and P15 in this Grand Prix. But again, at least they score points. And I think are in a lot better of a position than they were, of course, 12 months ago at the 2018 Australian Grand Prix. But one person I need to criticise is Antonio Giovinazzi. Now, he did do well to defend from Lando Norris for the amount of laps he did, but except for that, his weekend was poor. He never had any pace. In qualifying, P14, that's not good enough. That's not going to cut it at that team. He should have been, at worst, say P11 in that Alfa Romeo, considering where Kimi Raikkonen was. And then in the race, had no pace, was defending a lot when he stayed out longer than other cars such as Norris, Perez, you know, drivers like that. And, well, he didn't actually do an amazing job with defending his position because he fell for such a easy, common tactic by a driver behind to put the driver in front off by Kevin Magnussen, who made a feint to the inside, and then Giovinazzi fell for it. in rookie style, and he is basically a rookie, even though he's not literally a rookie for this Grand Prix. But yeah, I think for Giovinazzi he was quite poor, honestly. And you can't bring up the excuse of, oh, well, it's his first time at this track, because it's not. He raced here in 2017. So I think he should have been better. And he has to be a lot closer to Kimi Raikkonen in Bahrain. Kimi will be very good in Bahrain because Kimi is always good in Bahrain. But Antonio has to step it up. He cannot be floating around P14 and P15. He has to be... If he's not going to finish in the points, he has to be P11, P12 at the very worst. He cannot be P14, P15. That is not good enough considering the type of car that he is driving. Because, for example, the McLaren, I think the Racing Point and maybe the Toro Rosso as well are slower than the Alfa Romeo. And Giovinazzi finished behind both Toro Rossos, both Racing Points and Norris in the McLaren, and he would have finished behind Carlos Sainz as well if Sainz did finish. So not good enough for Antonio, and he does have to improve. But now let's move on to Haas F1, who did have the best car in the midfield this weekend. P6 and P7 in qualifying. And if Romain Grosjean did not have another issue with wheels at a pit stop, it would have been P6 and P7 once again for this team. It is disappointing, but at least for Haas, they did finish in the points of Kevin Magnussen finishing in P6, picking up 8 very, very important points. That could be very important at the end of 2019. But yeah, for Haas, they did clearly have the best car in the midfield, and they did deserve, with both cars really, to finish at the front of the midfield, but of course they didn't. But yeah, very impressive first weekend for Haas, but it is only really going to get better because at Bahrain, that track should suit the Haas car more, in my opinion. So yeah, don't be surprised if Haas are not only at the front of the midfield again, but not that far off the, say, third slowest team in Bahrain. I wouldn't be surprised if they're only half a second behind Red Bull, maybe in qualifying in Bahrain. I think they are going to be very, very competitive. But yeah, great weekend for Haas. And they look to me to actually be better than they were in 2018 at the same point. So looking good for this team, and hopefully they can learn from last year's mistakes and make a real push for P4 in the Constructors, because with the car they have, I think they can do it. I think they can finish in P4. So yeah, we'll see what happens there. Now moving on to Toro Rosso, a good day. Danny Kvyat finishing 10th. He could have finished 9th if he lined up a pass on Lance Stroll better than what he did at turn 3 towards the end of the Grand Prix. But a good enough result, finishing in P10. It's a better result than Toro Rosso had, for example, last season, so that is a positive. And Albon finishing in 14th. I think honestly, Alexander Albon, I think the reason he finished in P14 was because basically of a lack of experience at this track. At times, he did not make key overtakes when he really had to. And he did make a couple small, but in the end, costly errors, which cost him finishing higher up. For example, the mistake he made by almost hitting the wall at the exit of turn 10 and losing position to Sergio Perez. That's one. And he also, I think, could have passed, I think was it Giovinazzi, he could have passed him a bit quicker than he did. He was actually looking good in the Grand Prix until the first pit stops, because he was in P11, but then of course he got stuck in that train. But for Toro Rosso, a good Grand Prix, and if they can somehow replicate what they did in Bahrain last year, then you never know, this team could be a strong contender in the midfield, because this team also, like Alfa Romeo, looks a lot better than they did at the same race in 2018. So looking good there for Toro Rosso. Racing Point had a great result of Lance Stroll, and I just have to mention my second driver of the day was Lance Stroll. I know I've criticised the guy plenty, but I can admit a great performance when I see one, and that was one. He was very consistent in the first stint, and then when other drivers were being held up behind Antonio Giovinazzi, he put in the laps and got out ahead, and that's exactly what you do have to do when you stay out longer than other drivers. So great performance there by Lance Stroll, and if the Racing Point was a bit more developed, he could have finished ahead of Kimi Räikkönen and even Nico Hülkenberg, because he was right there to pick up from where they may have left off if they made any mistakes. And if the Racing Point was a bit faster, you never know, he could have finished in P7 in that car. So very impressive there for Lance. Perez, he never really looked that comfortable in the Grand Prix. He dropped back at the start to, I think it was P12, and then got stuck in that train behind Antonio Giovinazzi. In hindsight, Racing Point should have kept Perez out with Stroll, and then they both would have finished in the points, say P9 and P10. But there you go. And then Perez basically was stuck behind cars for the rest of the Grand Prix. He then got stuck behind Lando Norris for basically the whole of the final stint. So shame for Perez. But for Racing Point, they, to me, look a lot better than I thought they would at this Grand Prix. And Bahrain historically is a better track for this team. So Bahrain, this team should, in the race especially, be contending for points. And I'm really looking forward to seeing where they are. Because, yeah, as I said, Bahrain normally is a very, very good track. And then finally, we'll go on to Williams. Of course, Robert Kubica lost his front wing at the start. And then after that, his car was basically falling apart. His mirrors were falling apart. The whole car, the whole team, let's be honest, is falling apart. But one person I want to shout out is George Russell. Because in the early points of the Grand Prix, he wasn't that far behind Antonio Giovinazzi in a car that is so much slower than the Alfa Romeo. And I don't think he finished that far off in the Grand Prix of Giovinazzi. So quite impressive of a Grand Prix there for Russell. But of course, what can he do in that car? It's way, way too slow. And they are not going to score a point this season unless they get lucky. I don't see how they score a point this season. And yeah, they are not, of course, looking good at all. But guys, again, for the next 5 minutes, let me know in the live chat right now and in the comments, what do you think of the performances of the midfield teams? Do you think Renault did well considering the pace of their car? Do you think Haas do have the best car in the midfield? What do you think about Alfa, McLaren, Toro Rosso, Racing Point, and of course Williams? Let me know in the live chat in the comments, and I'll read out as many comments as I can. But again, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, as everything I did for the Australian Grand Prix weekend, I will be doing again for Bahrain and for every race in 2019. So don't forget to subscribe. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there. Or click my channel name, go to my channel page and subscribe. For now, let me move on to the live chat and see what you guys are having to say about the midfield. Let me take a look. Simon Cragland says Grosjean would have finished P8. Hülkenberg would have undercut Grosjean. Grosjean pitted 2 laps later, so no matter the pit stop, he would have lost a place. I don't think we can say that because we don't know. For example, Kimi Räikkönen pitted before Hülkenberg, and Kimi wasn't that far behind Hülkenberg and actually ended up further behind at the time. So I don't think we can quite say that. Let me look at some more comments. Simon Cragland says Magnussen drove a good race and great move on Giovinazzi. Yeah, he did a common thing that drivers do, try to feint to the inside to try and get the driver in front to make a mistake, and that's exactly what he did. Motorsport Tube says, in my opinion, Kvyat and Stroll were so lucky to get points as drivers like Norris, Albon and Perez all got held up by Giovinazzi. I see your point, but they still had to put in the lap times when they stayed out longer to get ahead. So I disagree. I don't think they were lucky. I think they capitalised on that situation, which you have to do. And for the drivers who were stuck behind Antonio Giovinazzi, they knew what they had to do. They had to pass them or pass him, and they didn't do a good enough job of that. So I can't call that luck. That's more just the drivers making the most of the situation. JB asks, Shaz, how did you do with your F1 fantasy team, and what are you thinking of changing for Bahrain? If you go and look at the league, I'm last, I'm pretty sure. And yet Tonka Toy Truck says, yeah, I have the lowest score. I am last in my own league. My team name, by the way, is Colgate F1. And if you want to join our fantasy league, the entry code is in the description. It says Chazza HDF1 F1 Fantasy League entry code. Enter that on the website, and you can compete with the rest of us. But and yeah, Roxford says, yep, Shazza just being polite. Yeah, disappointing. Who did I have in my team? I had Albon, Verstappen. I can't remember exactly my whole team because I've had to do a lot in this weekend. I haven't really paid that much attention to it, but yeah, I had Albon, Verstappen. I think I had Perez in the team, and I know I had Ferrari as my car, and of course they did not perform. And Simon Craglan asks, he's asking Tonka Toy Truck, but I think I know, Simon, where your team is. I think your team is 8th or 9th at the moment. Right, I'll read out this comment from Ivan Jones, and then I will move on to the analysis of the biggest talking points from this Grand Prix. Incidents such as the Ricciardo incident, Vettel and Verstappen going wheel to wheel, and what happened at Ferrari. Ivan Jones says the midfield order, in his opinion, is Haas, then Alfa Romeo, then Renault, then McLaren, then he says Force India, but he means Racing Point, Toro Rosso. But personally, actually, I think especially them last three are very tight, but the whole midfield are covered by half a second, maybe. I disagree with McLaren being ahead of Racing Point and Toro Rosso. I think McLaren are, as you'll see later on in the constructors' standings, they are, I think, the slowest out of the proper midfield, but it isn't a massive gap. They are very, very close to Racing Point and Toro Rosso. But I think Toro Rosso for sure are faster, but it's still close. And then Racing Point, I think, are just about quicker. And Simon Craglan says McLaren is ahead of Racing Point, in my opinion. I don't think so, because, well, the pace in the race really showed that McLaren do not have as quick a car, because Perez was putting Norris under pressure for the whole of the final stint. And also, Stroll was quite close to finishing ahead of Kimi Räikkönen and Nico Hülkenberg. So yeah, I think the Racing Point car was faster. But now, guys, let's move on to analysing the incidents from the Australian Grand Prix. Now, this is something I used to do on my old channel, Chazza HD, and it did go over quite well, so I'm going to do it again. And yeah, let's start off, of course, with that incident at the start. So this is on board with Daniel Ricciardo right after the lights went out. So you can see he has had a lot better of a start than Sergio Perez, and will definitely be pulling alongside on the run down to turn 1. But now, if we go to this picture, I want to illustrate why Daniel Ricciardo really was, for me, at fault for this, and I don't think actually was that unlucky with what happened. I think he just miscalculated his positioning on the track, because there is actually a gap alongside Sergio Perez. You might not think so, but Ricciardo is not that close to Perez as I think he thought. He thought he was almost touching Perez's side pod. He wasn't. He could have gone over slightly more to the left and I think made it down to turn 1. And you can see there the gap between Ricciardo's left front wheel and Perez's right hand side pod. There is more room for Ricciardo than he thinks, and he should have moved over slightly more. He should have been a lot closer, I think, to Perez here. He didn't have to be as far over to the right as he was. And then you can see this is at the point where Daniel Ricciardo made contact with that gutting along the grass, and then this is where he locked up at the at turn 1 after he of course lost his front wing. But again, there's more room for Ricciardo here. I don't understand why. I think at the time when he was going alongside Perez, he thought Perez was either going to squeeze him or thought that Perez was a lot closer to his side pod than he actually was. He had a lot more room to move over than I think he thought at the time, and he should have moved over slightly more to the left than he did. Now, I will say, as I go back to this picture, you could say, oh, he's unlucky, you know, in the start, it's, you know, close, it's tight, it's very hard to not have a crash. But for me, he should never have gone onto the grass. It should never really be an option. You're never going to go faster on the grass. Even if there was not that gutting there, he was not going to pass Perez down to turn 1, because if that gutting was not there and he slightly touched the grass, I think Perez would have got ahead of him into turn 1, because you don't go faster in an F1 car on grass. You don't. You do not go faster on an F1 car on grass, and he should never have considered to do that. But as I'll show now, as you can see there, again, locking his 2 front tyres, now he has no front wing at all. This is what Daniel Ricciardo had to say after his incident. He says, "I'm gutted," no pun intended, that's for sure. "I made a good start, managed to get a good run on Perez and then moved to the side. I put a wheel on the grass, which did not concern me. And then a massive bump caught me by surprise. It's unlucky more than anything, and unfortunately, that was our race run there and then." Now, I just want to analyse his comments here. Now, he says he got a good run on Perez, which he did. And he, of course, did move to the side of Perez on the run down to turn 1. But when he says, "I put a wheel on the grass, which did not concern me," no disrespect, but putting an F1 car tyre on grass probably should concern you, because that is off the track, basically. So I don't know why he thought he needed to be that brave down to turn 1. He didn't need to be. He could have been a bit more to the left and a bit closer to Perez, and I don't think he would have needed to go on the grass, and he shouldn't have gone on the grass anyway, even if he kept his car at the same point. If the only option was grass, he should have lifted slightly to maybe just tuck in behind Perez on the run down to turn 1, because it was not worth taking that risk down to turn 1. And I think Ricciardo was at fault for taking that risk. And it was a risk, because again, if you go on the grass in F1, you are taking a massive risk, because either your front wing can come off or certain parts of your car can fly off the car. And also, sometimes, if you touch the grass, as we saw in practice plenty of times at the penultimate corner, if you only touch the grass a small bit, you can end up spinning. Look at Bottas in practice. I think, was it practice 3 or practice 1? He touched the grass slightly at the exit, or no, the entry to the penultimate corner, and spun the car twice. So you have to know that risk of doing that, and I don't think Daniel should have took that risk. It was way too risky to do. It was unnecessary to do, considering there was so much more of the race left to go. It's, you know, You're 5 seconds into a Grand Prix. You don't need to be taking that risk down to turn 1. And he says he's unlucky, but for me, he is not unlucky. And also, even though it would probably be hard to spot, isn't that what track walks on a Thursday are all about? Trying to spot those gutters and areas that you wouldn't have thought of before. I know it's not an area of the track you're going to bother with really ever. But at the start of the Grand Prix, if you're going to go to the inside, maybe you should know the inside of the track a bit better than you do and know that it's there. But again, even if it wasn't there, he should not be on the grass. He should not be taking that option because he's never going to be faster on the grass rather than be on the track. So for me, he made a mistake. And I will say also, I thought he was really disappointing this weekend. He was consistently behind Hülkenberg and then had that in the race. And I think he came out and said after the Grand Prix that he felt as though he was too busy trying to please people. And I think he was. I think he had all this hype, you know, new team, new man. And, well, he disappointed for the entire weekend. He never really had any speed and did not put on an adequate enough show for his fans. And I think, as he said, he was too busy trying to please people when really he should have been focusing on the car and trying to get the best out of himself instead of being, you know, the fan favourite. He should have concentrated, I think, a bit more on trying to, get the pace out of the car. And maybe also the home pressure got to him in qualifying where he made a mistake, a small one in the first sector. But for me, Daniel was a bit disappointing this weekend. And for me, made a mistake in that incident. But I want to know what you guys think. So in the live chat and the comment section, let me know what you think of this incident. Was Ricciardo at fault for his own downfall? Did he cause his own downfall? Let me know in the live chat and comment section. And do you think he could have done anything better? Do you think he could have placed his car better? And also, what did you think of his performance at the Australian Grand Prix? I didn't think it was good enough. Maybe I'm underrating Nico Hülkenberg, but I think he could have done a lot better than he did. Right. Let me find some comments regarding what you guys think. Nib says, and it's great to see him in the chat. By the way, me and Nib will be doing a podcast tomorrow night, and will mostly be Nib's view of the Australian Grand Prix because he was there for all 3 days. So we'll hear what he had to say and what he saw. Chaz, he means that at most races he would get away with putting a wheel on the grass into turn 1. He shouldn't be there anyway. He shouldn't be there anyway. I disagree. If that is the only option, don't take it. I disagree with that. I don't think you should ever consider going on the grass because the chances of either spinning or losing some part of your car are very high when you go onto the grass in an F1 car. We've seen it plenty of times. Or even going off the track. Right, let me look up the chat. See what you guys are saying. JB, remember Daniel, Red Bull gives you wings. Right, let me take a look at some comments. I'm trying to find some comments about this crash. Daniel will remember next year. Yep. Ronan Brady says, I thought Ricciardo was poor anyway, out-qualified by the Hulk. I wouldn't say poor, but it wasn't a weekend that we're ever really going to remember from him. He never really had the pace at all during the weekend. I don't know if it was the balance of the car that he didn't like or something like that, but he never really had any speed. Simon Cracklin says, I don't think you should expect there to be a bump at the grass. It's not necessarily the bump in the grass, it's the going on the grass in the first place. You should never take that option, in my opinion. But that's just my opinion. I'd never go on the grass at the start because the chances of you crashing or taking something off your car are very, very high. Let me take a look at some more comments here. The F1 debate show says, I was expecting better personally. I always thought he was unlucky there, but when you showed that picture where he had space, then yeah, he could have avoided it. He will learn his lesson. Again, I'll go back quickly in case you guys have missed it. Hold on. This one. He's not being squeezed off the track. I mean, it's close, but he's not being squeezed off the track. He can move over slightly more to the left. And he could have just about probably made it if he slightly shifted his car to the left. And I think at the time, Ricciardo thought either Perez was going to squeeze him or that he was a lot closer to Perez than he actually was. But there you go. Move back to this and read out a few more comments. Right, let me find some more comments about this. Don Moody says, okay man, stop bashing people for ending up on the effing grass. He made an error. Well, yeah, he made an error, but I'm not bashing the guy. It's just, for me, I think he could have done better in that incident. I don't agree with this, oh, he was so unlucky thing. I think he could have done better in that incident. I don't think, if he was squeezed onto there and then lost his front wing, then yeah, fair, but he wasn't. And he should never have took to that area of the track anyway. He should have been a bit more cautious than he was. It was like he was trying to overly impress at the start and make an amazing start. Then, you know, make a more amazing start than really that was needed. All he needed to do was maybe gain one position at the start and then properly get into the race and start getting after people with his famous overtaking skill. That's all he really had to do. He didn't have to go for heroics down to turn 1 and end up in P6 at the end of the first lap. It was like he was maybe trying too hard to get past Perez, but yeah, he should have been more cautious in my opinion. And that's another point I want to make that Sebastian in the chat makes. And I thought this a bit. If that was Vettel, there would be an outrage. Exactly. If this was Sebastian Vettel, I guarantee you people would be saying, oh, you know, again, taking unnecessary risks, pushing too hard. But because it's Ricciardo, there's a different thought process with Ricciardo. I don't understand this. It's like there's different rules for different drivers. Daniel seems to get away with a lot of criticism when sometimes he's not always in the right. Most of the time he is, and he is a fantastic driver, and I really do rate the guy. But if it was Vettel that did that, you can guarantee that everyone would be ripping Sebastian Vettel apart. But because it's Daniel Ricciardo, it's, oh, don't worry, unlucky mate, better luck next time. And I don't like that. I wish all drivers were treated equally, but of course they are not. But I think now we'll move on to analysing the overtaking action between Sebastian Vettel and Max Verstappen. Now, this is also going to play in to the next topic after this, which is to do with Ferrari's issues. But here you can see Max Verstappen gets a great run on Sebastian Vettel and pulls to the outside. Now, Max, at this point, knows that he's not going to make an overtake at turn 1. And this is why, and Fernando Alonso, in his heyday, proved this plenty of times, this is why the switchback works so well and is so effective when in a battle with another driver. He knows he's not going to make a move at turn 1, but he also knows if he does a switchback not only in turn 1, but into turn 2 on the run down to turn 3, he has, with fresher tyres, a great chance of passing Sebastian Vettel. So here, he is setting up his car as wide as possible to get as best a run down to into turn 2 and then into turn 3. You can see there, he's a bit wider than he maybe would be going into turn 1. And then you can see here, once he switched back twice in turn 1 and then turn 2, now he has the momentum, the DRS, and the fresher tyres heading down to turn 3. And now he knows that he can absolutely, because he has that better run and fresher tyres and the DRS, make the move work. And that's why doing the switchback is probably one of the best, if not the best skill for overtaking, because you're always setting yourself up for a better exit off of a corner, especially if it runs onto another corner where you can make an overtake like you can from turn 1 down to turn 3. And then at the end of turn 3, Max Verstappen then brilliantly braked around the outside of Sebastian Vettel because of the fresher tyres and the more straight line speed heading down to turn 3. And then you can see here Max even further ahead. And then eventually Max is ahead. But I just want to praise Vettel here because, let me go back to this one. In 2018, we saw plenty of occasions where Sebastian Vettel did not know when to give up, went for unnecessary overtakes or tried to defend unnecessarily, and also lost his head plenty of times, and also picked the wrong fights. Now, I want to praise Vettel here because he could have easily done what he did in 2018 and just piled straight on and took him and Verstappen out of the Grand Prix at turn 3. But he was smart. He knew that he had to give Max enough room to get through the corner, but he also knew that he couldn't make it easy. So he stuck his car down the inside to let Max know he was there. But Max, of course, made the overtake stick on the exit of turn 3. But the Sebastian Vettel at the end of 2018 would have carried straight on and piled into Verstappen at turn 3. But because maybe Vettel has learnt his lesson slightly, but he didn't pick the wrong fight. The Red Bull car was faster, better tyres. He didn't give up his position. He didn't just say, here you go, Max, here's third place. But, he did not pick the wrong fight. And as I said in my season preview video, when it comes to stopping Mercedes in terms of the driving, selecting the correct and wrong fights is a very important part of the game. And I think Sebastian here nicely did not pick the wrong fight, because if he did, then it could have ended up in maybe a penalty if there was a collision, or both cars exiting the Grand Prix, and maybe a grid penalty for the next Grand Prix. So I think Sebastian here really, I have to commend him, because I criticised him a lot at the end of 2018 for his errors, but here he could have done exactly the same, but he didn't. For example, look at France with Valtteri Bottas, where he was not going to make a move, he was definitely behind, and then he just piled into him. He could have done the same here, but he did not. He thought before he did what he did, and both drivers got through the corner, and Sebastian and Max lived to fight another day. But yeah, let me know, guys, quickly, before I move on to the final talking point, before I get into the drivers and constructors standings. Let me know what you thought of this piece of overtaking, and did you think it was a good overtake? Did you think that Vettel did well not to pile into Verstappen at turn 3? Let me know in the live chat in the comments, and I will read out some comments very quickly. Ivan Jones says, Chazza, do you think the DRS zone will be shortened for the Bahrain Grand Prix due to more powerful DRS? I don't know. I hope it's a bit shorter, because I do think if it's as long as it was last year, I think we will see a bit, not too much overtaking. I don't think we can complain about that, but overtaking might be a bit too easy if it's as powerful as we, think it is. The F1 Debate Show says, great from Max, sensible yet skillful. Chaz, has Max finally matured as a driver for this year? I hope so. If you look at him at the end of 2018, he was so good. And if he can keep that level of performance up in 2019, there's no reason why this guy cannot contend for the World Championship. There's absolutely no reason why. And with overtakes like this, you know, the chances aren't that bad. They aren't that bad. Roxford says Vettel was right to not lose time defending. Absolutely. He was smart for once. He did not take an unnecessary risk in the first Grand Prix. JB says Verstappen in the Red Bull car is the master of time management. That's what gave him the grip to overtake Vettel. He knows when to save his tyres and when to use them. Ronan Brady says Vettel was a sitting duck. Goodbye to Prussia, who unfortunately has to go. Thanks for watching. Corolla says it was a good clean overtake. Yep, it was. Right, let me find some more comments when it comes to this overtake. I'll come to the bottom here. JB says, at the end of 2018, we saw how consistent and talented he was. He's talking about Max Verstappen. He's probably as good as Hamilton now, just needs a better car. Well, his car's not that far off. I mean, look in the race. Verstappen could have got Hamilton if the Red Bull car was slightly faster. I don't think he is as good as Hamilton. I think it's close, but I don't think he is as good. But if his Red Bull car was maybe slightly quicker, then he could have ended up finishing P2 ahead of Lewis Hamilton. So Red Bull car is already looking out the blocks a very good car, and I said that at testing that the Red Bull car chassis wise is the best on the grid, and it is. It's the best on the grid chassis wise. It's just Albert Park doesn't necessarily require the best chassis. It's more about mechanical grip, and that's something Mercedes really does have a lot of. But I think now I'm going to move on to the final topic before we get into, guys, the Q&A, which I will get into soon, and of course the drivers and constructors standings. Let's talk about Ferrari. Ferrari on race day were terrible. They had no pace. They were nowhere near Mercedes and Red Bull, really, even though Gasly finished in 11th. I think if Gasly had started, say, P6, where he really should have, I think Pierre would have ended up finishing ahead of the two Ferraris, because the Ferrari pace was shocking. It honestly was shocking. And, well, I've done some digging, and I found a quote from Sebastian Vettel, and also I have found some interesting bits and pieces of news that might explain why Ferrari at the moment don't seem to have any pace. So this is what Sebastian Vettel had to say after the Grand Prix. We were not happy with the car the whole weekend, but today we struggled a lot. The reason I was so slow in the race was mostly due to the fact that the car could not find enough grip with the medium tyres, exactly, that we fitted at the pit stop. As a team, we still got a decent amount of points from our 4th and 5th places, but this is not the result we were aiming for just a few weeks ago. Yeah, it was a bit of an embarrassing Grand Prix, let's be honest, for Ferrari. They were hoping to be winning this Grand Prix, maybe not be on pole, but winning the Grand Prix, but they were nowhere near. They were losing about a second a lap over both cars at most points of the race on Sunday. But what exactly is wrong with this Ferrari car? Let's start off with the most interesting part, the power unit. Now, it has come out over the weekend that there are issues with the Ferrari power unit, because Kimi Raikkonen complained of a lack of, I think, electrical or ERS boost. Grosjean also complained over a lack of, I think, electrical charge for his qualifying lap. And noticeably, if you go back and look at the speed traps, the Ferrari was quite low down, even compared to the Honda in the back of the Red Bull, and even the Honda in the back of the Toro Rosso. So they do have issues with that power unit, and the issues I think it is ERS deployment and also battery saving, or charging the battery. I think it has everything to do with the ERS battery, because where they were struggling most, and you'll notice this if you go back and watch the battle between Vettel and Verstappen, you'll notice it a lot in that battle. At the end of the straights, the Ferrari was giving up a lot of time compared to the Honda. For example, down to turn 1 in that battle, Verstappen, he was gaining on Vettel, but at the end of the straight, where you desperately do need all the ERS battery you need, he was struggling. And then again down to turn 3, at the end of that straight, the Red Bull just pulled clear and overtook because the Ferrari ERS battery, for some reason, was not deploying at the end of the straight where it needs to. And I will say, for you guys, this is a bit of a tip for you guys to notice in future races and seasons. When it comes to ERS deployment and issues with that, you will notice it most at the end of a straight. So, for example, in Australia, Ferrari's ERS deployment was struggling at the end of the pit straight, at the end of the straight down to turn 3, the end slightly of the straight down to turn 6, I think, and then the straight heading towards turn 9. It would have been struggling at the end of that, and then of course the straight between 10 and 11 at the end of the middle sector, and then the straight from the 11-12 chicane down to turn 13. So that's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's 6 acceleration zones at Albert Park where the ERS on the Ferrari would have really needed to kick in, and it didn't. And I think, from what I've seen and from what I've heard, Ferrari do have an issue with the battery on their car. Now, they have to fix this if this is a legitimate issue, because Bahrain will show that up even more, because you've got pit straight in Bahrain, which is so long, from the end of the final corner all the way down to turn 1. Then you have the straight going down to turn 4. You have the second DRS straight in the middle of the track, and then you have that straight that is in between the last corner and the penultimate corner. Those straights will really expose that issue if that issue is still there. I think the aerodynamics of this car is still good. I think, though, the reason they are not as quick as maybe they hope is because they have issues with the battery on the power unit. Because I think in Bahrain, aerodynamically, they will be a lot closer to Mercedes, or maybe even ahead, if they can sort their issues out. But yeah, I think that's what really in the race caused their downfall. They had issues with their engine, and yeah, for Bahrain, they've got to sort that out, because Bahrain will show that up even more, especially at the end of the pit straight on the run down to turn 1. If they're struggling again with that, then you know that they have big problems going forward, because then you have Shanghai, we have that massive straight, and then Baku, of course. You need all the energy possible going down to turn 1. So Bahrain should be a real indicator as to whether this is actually an issue for this team. But before I go on to the drivers and constructors points, I just want to quickly cover the whole team orders and other mistakes that Ferrari made. So when it comes to team orders, for me, Ferrari were absolutely correct, because they had nothing to gain from letting the two drivers race. Leclerc was not going to catch Max Verstappen. Neither was Sebastian Vettel. So keeping them as they were and not letting them race was the correct decision. I cannot criticise Binotto for that. The team is bigger than the drivers. Yes, you could say, oh, well, it's boring team orders, but the team do not care about your entertainment, nor should they. They're trying to run a team successfully, and they have to try and score the most amount of points that they can. And, well, keeping them the way they were was a better decision than letting them race, when Leclerc, by the way, almost made contact with Sebastian Vettel at the start. So it could have been tears, and they could have ended up with nothing in the Grand Prix. So it was the right decision to call team orders. But one thing they should have done is pitted Charles Leclerc to go for the fastest lap point. I don't know why they didn't do that, because they did not maximize the amount of points they could have got. I think they maximized the amount of points. Say if the fastest lap point did not exist, then they have maximized the amount of points that they could have without calling team orders. But with the fastest lap point there, I don't get why they did not pit Charles Leclerc to go for the point. They should have, because you never know, that point might be rather key at the end of this season. But yeah, terrible weekend for Ferrari. Qualifying with Vettel, I think he did very well actually to finish where he did, but in the race, that car had no pace whatsoever. Right, let me quickly look through the chat to see what you guys are saying. Jeffrey Guyot says, I heard that Ferrari has a cooling problem. I heard that they opened some of the bodywork. I haven't heard that, but I'll have a look. Corolla says, exactly what I think. They should have pitted Leclerc for the fastest lap. Absolutely. Absolutely, they should have. JB says Ferrari should be the fastest car in Bahrain. I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure. I think in qualifying they will be very close to pole if they're not on it. I think they might be on pole, to be honest, but in the race, if they maintain that kind of speed compared to their rivals, then I don't think they can really win in Bahrain. Graham Hobbs says, or he's saying to JB, but I want to read this out because it's quite interesting. Did you see how tentative Vettel was going into turn 1? Leclerc did well to avoid him. You'd think with a poor grid position, he'd be keen to make up places. Well, Vettel was actually defending from Verstappen, who was looking to maybe make a move to the inside, but he did not. So, yeah, Vettel kind of had to be like that. The F1 Debate Show says, you have Bahrain, China and Azerbaijan, which have long straights. Oh dear, they want to get it sorted before then. Yep, they do. Albert Park, a lot of it is about acceleration and high speed, but it doesn't have any straight which is as long as the straights or some straights at Bahrain, Shanghai and Baku. So if they haven't sorted that issue out and it is a real issue, you will see it manifest at those races, and they're going to have to then, for Canada, which is normally when you first bring a major upgrade to your power units, they're going to have to bring something to limit that issue. And JB says, did you see Leclerc start? I thought he was quite aggressive going into turn 1. Could have given Vettel a puncture. He needs time to mature. Hopefully in a few races' time we can see his true talent. I think he tried to do basically what Lewis Hamilton did in 2007, and it almost worked, but not quite. Yeah, maybe he was a bit too aggressive, but if he got past at the start, you never know, he probably would have finished ahead of Vettel. So it would have worked out eventually. By the way, hello to Francisco. The F1 Debate Show. How can you have a car that looks so quick and reliable in testing, but then lose that pace in the first weekend? Madness. I think the aerodynamics and chassis on the car are good. It's just the power unit I think is struggling at the moment. And he also says, I can see Ferrari being third at this rate if they don't resolve the issue. Also, will this cause Vettel to walk out from Ferrari when his deal runs out? We'll have to see. Let's not get too over the top, because you never know. Ferrari could end up getting pole and locking out the front row in Bahrain and then winning, and then we're all shut up, aren't we? But if the Bahrain Grand Prix was, say, today, I don't think Ferrari would win the Bahrain Grand Prix. I think they might have got, I think they may get pole, but I don't think they would get the race win if it was today. Hopefully they can find some kind of resolvement to the issue that they have. And they do have an issue, and I think it is with charging the battery and deploying the battery. It's all to do with the ERS. But now let's go into the drivers and constructors standings. So in the drivers championship, Valtteri Bottas leads the drivers championship for the first time in his career. He has 26 points. That's one extra point, by the way, for the fastest lap. Hamilton is second, Verstappen third, Vettel fourth, Leclerc fifth, Magnussen is sixth, Hülkenberg is seventh, Raikkonen eighth, Stroll ninth, and Kvyat in 10th. So, well, that's basically, of course, the order of the Australian Grand Prix. But yeah, looking good for the Flying Finn at the top. And in the constructors, Mercedes already have a 22-point lead over Ferrari, who are only 7 points clear of Red Bull. Then Haas are fourth. That's exactly where Haas want to finish this season. Renault are fifth. Alfa is sixth. Racing Point is seventh. Eighth is Toro Rosso. Then McLaren and Williams are 9th and 10th with no points. So those are the championships. And now, guys, for the next 20 minutes, I will answer your comments in regards to the race or any questions that you have regarding anything. I'll go ahead for the next 20 minutes and ask it, and I'll answer as many as I can. And also, if you're watching this after the stream has finished, make sure to also ask your questions. And after, in the comment section, I'll try to reply to as many comments as I can. But again, don't forget to subscribe for more F1 race weekend content coming up like this. Bottom right of the screen, you can click subscribe right there, or click on my channel name, go to my channel page and subscribe. And of course, hit the like button on this video and comment down below what you thought of this video. And you know, with everything I've talked about, comment down below whether you think I'm wrong on something, on the incidents I've analysed, on what I've talked about with Ferrari, Mercedes, whatever. Comment down below what you thought about what I had to say, and also comment down below your thoughts of what happened in Melbourne. But now, let me get into answering some comments, or some questions rather. Let me find the start of this, and here we go. So Jago Design gets the first one. What about this year's race? If you're talking about how good it was, pretty good. I can't hate it. I think this was the best Australian Grand Prix probably since 2013. It was pretty good. It wasn't great, but it was pretty good. Francisco asks, did Ricciardo ruin his race at the start, or was he unlucky? What do you think? If you actually scroll back through the stream, I did analyse that, and in my opinion, he took an unnecessary risk. It's a bit hard for me to say that. He took an unnecessary risk. He didn't have to go on the grass. If going on the grass is the only option, you shouldn't do it, because there's a big chance you're going to end up spinning or taking parts of your car off. Ronan Brady asks, what do you think of Ted Kravitz at the moment? His absence, that is, until China. It's so terrible. And I plead with Ted again, you have a YouTube channel, start that up and start uploading content to that, because you could easily get over 100,000 views a video. And, you know, it wouldn't pay the bills, but he would remain very popular. I mean, look at Mark Priestley and look what he's doing with his channel. And he actually did work for Sky F1, I think, or did some contributions. So it works. Why not do that? So I plead with Ted to do that, because I think, honestly, he is out of the door at that, out at the door of a Sky F1. Because the new boss clearly does not like Ted Kravitz, which is a massive shame. Ronan Brady asks also, would Ricciardo have overtaken Kvyat in Gasly's position? Yes, he would have. But we've said this, Ricciardo is better than Gasly, obviously, and I don't think Gasly will ever be as good as Daniel Ricciardo. So, you know, it's not really a massive debate to be had about that, I think. JB asks, do you see Bottas being a true title contender? No. But I will say, I could be proven wrong on that. I could be. But right now, I'm going to go with the safe option and say no. But also, one thing to note is the next track, Bahrain, historically tends to be a lot better of a track for him than Melbourne. So if he can be that good at Australia, then Bahrain he should be mega quick. Jago Design was referring to the amount of overtakes compared to last year. Yeah, it was a good race. A lot better than last year, in my opinion. And yeah, there you go. Aqua, I think it is, asks, will Kvyat replace Gasly at Red Bull? No, I don't think he will. It would be amazing if that happened, and it would take Gasly basically having to be terrible, but I don't think that's going to happen. Roxford asks, should Red Bull have left Gasly as senior driver at Toro Rosso and promoted Kvyat to Red Bull? Again, no, I don't think that should have happened. But if Gasly, this is the thing, if Gasly does not perform and they do drop him mid-season, who do they replace him with? They can't put Sainz in there because Sainz is at McLaren and basically not a part of the Red Bull driver program anymore. It'd have to be Kvyat. It'd have to be, unless Alexander Albon is massively outperforming Kvyat, which I don't think he will. Mr. Random Guy asks, do you think Haas will be strong in Bahrain? By the way, they were only 3/10 behind Leclerc in qualifying. Yes, they were. I noticed that. That was very good from Romain Grosjean. I think they'll be stronger in Bahrain. I think Bahrain suits that car more. So watch out for them in Bahrain. Graham Hobbs, Ricardo should have / could have walked the track better. Beginner's error, much as I love him. It is something that maybe you should notice on a track walk, but then again, it's an area of the track you're never really going to focus on at all. So I could see his point for not ever, you know, focusing on that part of the track, because it's a part of the track you're never really going to use. But yeah, let's now move on to some more questions. JV, have you seen Nico Rosberg's channel? Maybe Ted Kravitz can work alongside him. Yeah, I have seen Nico's channel, but I think Ted, he actually does have his own channel, and I think he should do it by himself, because I think him by himself is very good and would be good enough for him. Mr. Random Guy, how many wet races do you hope there will be? 3 or 4. But that's probably a bit too optimistic. The F1 Debate Show asks, do you think it's a shame that Kubica works hard for 3 to 4 years to get back into F1 and this is the result he gets? Can you see him lasting this season? I think he will last the season, but he, yeah, it is a shame that he has worked this hard to come back to a car that is so bad. It is a shame. Ronan Brady, do you think Sky might bow to the pressure from fans about Ted by any chance? I agree with your assessment of the situation. Unless a petition is started and so many people sign it, I don't think they will bow to the pressure. But make sure you start a petition on Twitter, spread it around, get people signing it, and make sure it's a lot of people, you know, into the thousands, and send a message to them that we want Ted. And make sure to do that on Twitter. Hashtag we want Ted. Francisco, do you think Kimi underperformed? A lot of my friends think he did. I personally think he did all right and will do better this season, or in the season. Yes, I think he did. Only slightly though, not massively. I think he could have finished in P7 and probably could have out-qualified Norris in qualifying. But then again, Raikkonen had ERS deployment issues, I think. So, not much he maybe could have done in quali. Right, let me look for some more comments. Don Moody, I think Ferrari also has a management problem, power struggle at some level maybe. Well, that power struggle was supposed to have ended with Maurizio Arrivabene going. So that would be a surprise if that is happening, because it's supposed to be over. But yeah, we'll see how that develops and how that team develops in 2019. Regarding which races will be where, I honestly cannot call that. I can't call that. That's too hard to call. I've answered Ronan Brady's one. From JB asked the same one. Simon Troop, will Niblo be doing the race watch along with you in Bahrain? Yes, the plan is Nib will be doing every race watch along from Bahrain on until the end of the season. So when I'm having to take a quick break to, do the running order as I did during the race watch along, Nib will then take over and commentate, and then I'll come back in and vice versa. So yeah, me and Nib will be doing the race watch alongs from Bahrain on for the rest of the season, and I might bring him in a few times for qualifying, but it depends what track and how important it is. If it's Monaco, then I probably will have him on for the qualifying watch along. But definitely every race watch along from now on, Nib will be a part of, and some qualifying watch alongs as well. Right. Let's take a look at some more comments. Sebastian, who do you think will be on pole at Bahrain? I honestly can't answer that. I don't know. I think practice, at the end of practice 2, we will have a much, much better idea, because we need to find out whether Ferrari actually do have issues or whether it was track specific. I think aerodynamically and chassis wise, I think it was track specific, but with the power unit, we don't know. But I would lean to say right now, even though I don't know anything about the pace at that track yet, say Vettel on pole from Bottas second, and then Hamilton third, and Leclerc fourth. Yeah, I'd go with that. Actually, maybe Verstappen fourth and Leclerc fifth, because Leclerc was not that good in qualifying, to be honest, in Melbourne. Ronan Brady, what's your opinion of Karim Shandhok, though? I think he was very good at the Skypad, but only an average reporter. He is good. This is the thing. He's not an improvement on Ted Kravitz, but that doesn't mean that he is bad. He's not bad. He's very good, but he's not Ted Kravitz. So, yeah, there you go. Someone asking there, can Red Bull win in Bahrain? Absolutely, they can. I think they'll get a podium and get again in Bahrain. Whether they'll win, I don't know. I don't know if they'll have the pace, but I think they'll be closer to winning in Bahrain, and then in Shanghai, that will be Red Bull's best chance to win before we get to the European season starting in Spain. So it can only get better for Red Bull. Daniel Crawford, thoughts on Leclerc? He was quite poor in Australia. Yeah, in qualifying, he was disappointing by his own admission. He admitted he was disappointed by qualifying fifth. And then in the first half of the Grand Prix, he was poor, going off the track and being as slow as he was. In the second half of the Grand Prix, he was better, but I can't say he was good because the pace of his teammate on the medium tyres was so bad. That's why he caught him on the hard tyres that were a lot fresher. So not a good weekend for Charles Leclerc, and I think by his own admittance, he was not good enough. Jago Design, do you think that Alfa Romeo could finish in front of Ferrari in some race or races? No, I don't think that is possible. I think the only way that will happen is if Ferrari have a crash or, a spin, pit stop issues, something like that. I don't think based on actual pace, Ferrari will finish behind Alfa. But that would be a massive story if that did happen. Right. Let me find some more comments. I'm going to answer questions for another 5 minutes, guys, and then I will come to the end of this race review. Francisco asks, I know it's early, but if Mercedes win the Constructors this year, do you think they overtake Ferrari as the most dominant team of all time? If if Mercedes win the Drivers and Constructors this year, then for me, this Mercedes team would go down as the greatest team in Formula One history. Because to consistently keep winning championships through 3 regulation changes, that is so impressive, because I don't think any other team has done that. Even Ferrari in the early 2000s did not overcome that many technical regulations to win as much as they did. There was only one technical regulation change with the cars, which was in 2001 that they had to alter their car to. But yeah, if Mercedes win this year, then they'd have to, for me, go down as the greatest F1 team in history, honestly. Right, let me go through some more. The F1 debate show, what's coming up on the channel between now and Bahrain? I will get onto that in a moment, because I do want to make it clear what is coming up, and there is definitely stuff coming up. Don't worry, guys, I'm not going to just abandon you until Bahrain. There is stuff coming up. Ultraman, who's going to replace Vettel in the future? I can't say right now. It's too hard to say that. Maybe Max, if Red Bull are not close enough to win the championship and Ferrari are closer. Maybe Max, but I can't say right now. I can't say. Francisco asks, Bahrain has the potential to be midfield chaos. What do you think? Well, it was last year, and I think it'll be even more chaotic this year. I think we're going to have plenty of passing between the Alfa Romeo, Haas, Toro Rosso, Renault, Racing Point. List goes on. We're going to have plenty of racing between the midfield. And I think at the top as well, I think Verstappen, as long as he doesn't do what he did last year and have accidents with a wall and Lewis Hamilton, as long as he can, stay consistent and get the best out of the car, I think he will end up overtaking maybe a couple people. The Ferraris, they're going to be involved. Maybe a Mercedes as well. So we'll see. Right, let me find 2 more questions and then I'll come to the end here. Thomas Hill asks, who do you think will finish P7 in the drivers and constructors? I think what you mean is with the constructors, who will finish best of the rest, or at least I'm hoping that's what you mean. In the drivers, P7 will be... I'm still going to go Daniel Ricciardo, because I think the Renault will improve and I think he will get a lot out of that car. For the constructors, my prediction was Renault, but I'm starting to doubt that now, because Renault in Australia were a lot worse than I thought they were going to be. I didn't think they'd be that great in Australia, but I didn't think they would be both cars knocked out of Q2. And Haas's pace has really impressed me, so I'm not sure I'd go with Renault right now. Renault and Haas are really quite neck and neck with me, but also Alfa Romeo, they will improve as the season goes on. I think Bahrain, Alfa Romeo will be even better than they were in Australia. I think Kimi is really going to be strong in Bahrain, because he normally is. Baku, I think Alfa will be good there. So it's really shaping up to be a great battle in the midfield. Right, now I will answer I'll go find the final question to end on, and I'll come to the end of the stream. Let me just find it a moment. And I will leave off with Daniel Crawford's question. His is, how many wins do you think Max, Leclerc and Gasly will get in 2019? Max, I'm going to go 3. Leclerc, I'm going to go 3. And Gasly, I'm going to say none. I don't think Gasly is good enough to win a race. I think he'd need a bit of luck, to be honest, to get a race win. Maybe at Monaco, maybe at Mexico he can, but Max should be on top there, to be honest. But guys, that has been the end of the first race review of 2019 for the 2019 Australian Grand Prix. The content though for the 2019 Australian Grand Prix part of the channel is not over yet, because tomorrow night we will be live for the podcast where it's mostly going to be Nib's point of view of the Grand Prix, because he was there for all 3 days, Friday, Saturday and Sunday, and he was there also on Wednesday and Thursday, I think, as well. So we're going to get his view and really analyse it from his point of view tomorrow night. We're not going to be live for very long tomorrow night, probably an hour and a half, but there you go. But what is coming up on the channel between now and Bahrain? Well, you got that tomorrow night. Then on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I'm not going to upload because I need to work on a video that will come out, say, this time next week. And it is to do with Mercedes. And I think you guys are going to like it and appreciate it. So yeah, I'll upload that this time next week, hopefully, or maybe on next Tuesday. But this weekend coming, we will be doing a podcast again, Saturday 3 PM. And This Week in F1, my news show that I do every 2 weeks, basically, will be on Sunday at 3 PM. Then the video to do with Mercedes will be either Monday or Tuesday next week. Then I will finally upload a preview for a Grand Prix. I'm going to do the Bahrain Grand Prix preview. That will be uploaded probably Thursday, because guys, because of the success of the practice 2 watch along, I'm going to do that again for Bahrain. So that's what's going to go down at Bahrain. But yeah, you've got between now and practice 1 in Bahrain, you've got podcast tomorrow night, then 3 days with no content, and then podcast on Saturday, This Week in F1 on Sunday, a video about Mercedes on either Monday or Tuesday next week, and then the Bahrain Grand Prix preview, hopefully, I'm not guaranteeing it, but hopefully on Thursday, on the Thursday before the race weekend gets going. So that's what's going down on the channel between now and Bahrain. But guys, thank you for coming along, as ever. And also, I want to say thank you very much if you're new to the channel for subscribing, because I've had so many new subs this weekend. We've gained about 330 subs and had so many views. If you're new to the channel and you subscribed, thank you so much. I love you all. But don't forget to subscribe if you are new for the content coming between now and Bahrain. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there by clicking subscribe, or click on my channel name, go to my channel page and subscribe. And also hit the notifications bell, like this video, comment down below what you thought of this video, and comment down below what did you think of the performances of some of the teams and the situations going on at some of the teams like Ferrari. And also comment down below what did you think of my opinion of what's going on at Ferrari, also my opinion of the Ricciardo incident and the Vettel Verstappen stuff. And also yeah, comment down below what you thought of the race in general. Was it good? Was it bad? Let me know in the comments. Also, don't forget to join my F1 Fantasy League. The entry code is in the description where it says F1 Fantasy League entry code. Make sure to enter that on the website and you can enter. Don't forget as well to join my Discord server. That's the best place for notifications for my videos and is the hardcore Chazza HD F1 community. So yeah, make sure to join that if you want the best place for notifications for my videos so you can watch them. And follow me on Twitter at Chaz6110, a great place to keep up to date with me on the channel and what I'm doing. And if there is any issue as to why I'm not uploading, I will most likely post it on Twitter. And also, make sure to check out my website, chazzahd.com, for more content like this. But guys, until tomorrow night for the podcast, where we'll get Nib's point of view of what happened down under. And also, until the next Grand Prix in Bahrain, it's been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.